Hello everyone, this is Alberto. I am a professor of economics at UNSW. Together with Isabella, we are the creators of Play Economics. Before actually giving you detailed instruction on how to play these levels, let me show again how you can download it. Remember, log in at playeconomics.com, then you can view details right there, view details, and then from here you can download the game. You can download the game for Windows or for Mac. This is really important. It doesn't really matter what type of computer you use. You can download both versions. You can download this in as many computers as you want. You can download on a PC, on a Mac, and then on another PC, just anywhere you want. It doesn't matter because we save all your progress in the cloud, so the client that you're using is not really important. You can open this game anywhere you want. If you download this for Windows, just a word of caution, please make sure that before pressing the execute file, please unzip the folder, okay? Right-click the file that you get from downloading here, and then right-click and unzip before you proceed. For Mac, there is no problem because it's gonna unzip automatically. After you have done that, and you right-click and then open the application, you will see this login page here. Here again, you put in the same username and password that you introduced when you signed up. So very simple. If you click on each one of them, you are gonna see how much time this scenario works for, the difficulty level, and how many scenario points you can earn. These scenario points will translate into marks. I'm gonna touch on that right after I play a little bit of the game so you can see how that works. Let's jump right into one of these scenarios. You can see a description here of what we're gonna do in that scenario, and there is an easy and hard mode. The easy mode is just showcasing more clearly what are the objectives of the level, and the hard mode hides that, but they give you the same amount of course marks, scenario points, so you can pick whichever you want. And the scenarios are not that hard even in hard mode, and there is a very comprehensive tutorial explaining you what to do, so don't worry too much, just pick the setting that you prefer. Chapter 1 clicked. I'm going in easy mode so I can actually see the objectives more clearly. Let's do it. The game is gonna load. This is what we would call in economics your first model. Let me put up this slide. A model is nothing but a simplified representation of reality. That's what a model is as we define it in economics. It's a simplified representation of reality. Models are incredibly important, and we use models in so many ways in society, in modern life. Economists create models because human behavior is potentially very, very complex. An economist would like to understand and predict human behavior, but you can imagine how complex a task that is. Well, first of all, I cannot quite predict what's happening in anyone's brain, and it would be very hard for me to even predict what you're gonna do next. So think about the job of an economist, which is to predict not just what individuals are gonna do, but also what society overall is gonna do, a lot of individuals interacting together. This can be a pretty daunting task, and that's why we use models. We simplify this complexity in a way that make that more digestible and easier for us to make some prediction upon. You can think of other disciplines in science, for example, that use models to great effect. Chemistry, for example. You have probably seen some of those formulas talking about how gas behave. Well, that's not like a perfect representation of the behavior of gases, but it is a formula that helps us make some prediction. Or the weather. Weather forecasts are based on models that are not a perfect replica of the real world, but are simple enough that allow us to make some prediction. And in biology, a model is not a formula or a simulation. Sometimes it's a mouse. In biology, they called the mouse model, because sometimes before doing intervention or treating individuals, we prefer as a society, based on our current ethics, to treat instead, for example, mouse, or look at the behavior of fruit flies, because those organisms are simpler and they act like a model for a human being. We use models all the time, and I think it's really important to understand this as we get into play economics and we explore the objective here with this game. What you have in front of you, it's a model. It's a simplified representation of reality. We are not using just formulas in this course. We use also a video game because it's interactive and it makes the experience even better. The way this model works determines, for example, the speed. There are things that I can do. If I press spacebar, I can roll, but for example, I cannot jump. This is a simplified version of reality that determines what I can do within the simulated world. And it's a model that's interactive, so you can play with it and see the consequences of your action in real time. The way to play this game is to first approach these tutorials here, these wizards that are going to give you a lot of information on how to play the game. For example, this one is telling me to walk up to the other wizard by pressing D. So it's telling me how to move my character. And you can see at the bottom of the screen here that we're going to use WASD to move my character around. Now I can talk with this wizard that's going to give me even more information about the level. And when I'm talking with them, we are conveniently pausing time, so you can take your time and read what they're telling you. And you can always set up time back in motion by clicking here or just walking away. I'm gonna let you explore this level by yourself when you download the game. You can talk with these wizards. They are gonna give you very interesting information about what a factor of production is. So have a chat with them and explore the level a little bit. Here I want to highlight a couple of important concepts that we are gonna cover in this level. Oh, the level is finished. By clicking on this button here, I can pause time so that I can talk a little bit without getting to the end of the scenario. Very well, so I'm gonna run inside here. There you go. An important concept in economics that we are gonna touch here is the decision of whether to buy this apple. If I get close to this seller, I can see that he's offering me that apple for $10. Now, $10 may sound like a lot of money. Let's see, right-clicking on my agent is gonna tell me how much money do I have. Oh, I have $10. That's all my budget gone for one apple. Here is a very simple model and a very simple decision. Let's flesh out what are the economic concepts behind it. What's going to be important here is to understand the definition of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost of a given action is the value of the next best alternative to that particular action. So this is the definition of opportunity cost. Not necessarily the cost per se of, for example, purchasing an apple, but what are you losing by purchasing that apple? What are the resources that you are using, and especially how you could have used these resources for an alternative purpose? Now, the interesting thing is that if you look at the world from the lenses of opportunity cost, the value of the next best alternative to that particular action, you might find that it could be surprising what type of result you get. In this case, you have $10. That apple is very expensive at $10. But trust me when I say that in this level, there is nothing else that you can purchase. Hence, really, in the context of this simple model, those $10 are basically not very helpful except for buying apples. So if you don't buy that apple, there is no alternative use to those $10. This means that the opportunity cost of spending $10 on an apple is zero, because there is no alternative use for that money. Knowing this, understanding that the opportunity cost of buying that apple is zero, is definitely a good idea for me to go and grab it. So I grab that apple. As I go on with the level, I can also answer some of these questions that the quizzers are asking me, like, for example, questions about the factors of production. I'm gonna eat this other apple. And finally, I'm gonna place down the apples that I have collected on my dinner table. And as you can see here in the logs, by placing down apples on the dinner table, I'm actually gaining happiness. Every apple is giving me additional happiness. This is in fact the objective of this level, to achieve the maximum level of happiness that you can. And this is the objective of economics overall. Although when you may read your textbook, you could have the impression that economics is really about describing reality and just a lot of definitions. But the reality of the economics subjects is that they are aimed to improve society. The objective of an economist is to maximize the happiness for society. And this is exactly what each and every one of these scenarios are going to ask you to do, to get the maximum happiness that you can get by making good economic decisions. And in fact, later on, the question is going to be, what can we do for society to maximize everyone's happiness? Your score will be a function of how well you reach the maximum happiness that has been reached by other students in that level. So it's all benchmarked, and it creates an interesting kind of competition with other students in finding the best solution for the economy. You can speed up time at any time you want by clicking on these arrows when you are ready to leave the scenario. And you can also click this button here to skip to the end of it. It's going to ask me, are you sure you want to skip to the end of the scenario? I'm going to click confirm. I can have a look at this scenario where it shows me how well I did relative to the objective. My score is 100%. I have gained 5 scenario points. I have currently claimed 0 of them, so the number of claimable scenario points is now 5. If you want more information about this, please press the question mark here. If you click on claim reward, we are gonna run the scenario on our server, just make sure that everything is correct, and then assign you your scenario points. You can see them here. I got rewarded 5 scenario points right there. Very well. Remember, if you want to gain some scenario points, you have to press the claim reward button. This is very important. And you can also check the leaderboards to see how other students have done. This is the first, I am the first to play this level. So you can see that if I check the all-time leaderboard, oh, there is me, but there is also Tim. Okay, so this is our developer who has played the level and is now in the leaderboard. I did actually better than him. I got 1 unit of happiness, or utils as we call it in economics. He got only 0.5. And you can check the all-time leaderboard or this particular session. In this particular session, I got 1 unit of happiness. Very well. Remember, this is all anonymous, so there's no problem in being identified. You won't be identifiable in these leaderboards. You can close the leaderboard, you can replay the scenario if you want, or you can go back to the main menu. And let's do that, because I would like to use maybe 10 more minutes to go over another scenario, chapter 2, the cost-benefit principle. So let's jump into that. Now, this level, I'm going to let you explore it and go over the dialogues. Let me just jump this queue and get to the core question of this level. Now, the core aspect of this level has to do with what we call in economics the cost-benefit principle. The decision that your character is now asked to make in this particular level is to produce apples. And the main question at this point is, how many apples should my character produce? Well, that really is a very important question in economics, and we want to have some principle to guide how we think about this decision making. And the cost-benefit principle help us with that. The cost-benefit principle states that an action should be taken if the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. There is an important point here. Economists think of decision making always at the margin. In other words, they prefer to think about optimization as a process of small decisions. Like, for example, do I want to go and watch a movie today? You make that decision, and then you ask yourself, okay, do I want to see another movie now? And depending on the answer, then you may ask, do I want to watch another movie? This is marginal decision making. You take a small action, then you think about, should I take another action? Should I take another action? I think it makes sense because mostly in life, that's how we make decisions. I doubt that at the beginning of the year, you plan, I want to go to the movies 100 times or 55 times during this year. We don't make those big overarching decisions usually. Instead, we decide moment to moment, should I go to the movies now? And then after you went, you may wonder, do I want to go to the movies again this week? And that's the idea of marginal decision making. And in this particular case, you can see the apple here, how many apples to produce is actually that type of decision, because you're gonna decide whether to produce the first apple. And then once you have decided whether you wanna do it or not, if you decide to in fact go on and produce, you're gonna ask yourself, should I produce now another apple, a second one? And if you decide to produce the second one, then you can ask yourself, should I produce a third one? In order to get more information about the optimal decision that you should take in this case, it's a good idea to right-click on these apples. So that's what I just did. Right-click with your mouse on the apple. There is a lot of interesting information when you do that. You can see, for example, and let me condense this information for you, you can see the effort equation. This means that your character is gonna exert effort, and so your character is gonna experience unhappiness from picking apples. And this is driven by the fact that in this particular model, and remember, no model is perfect. In this particular model, we decide to represent this example in such a way that your character doesn't like working. So picking up an apple creates a cost for them in terms of reducing their happiness. So this effort cost, in other words, creates this utility. Utility is the name, the jargon that we use in economics to express the idea of satisfaction, happiness. Working makes this character unhappy. And you can check the cost of this by looking at this equation. It's 0.5 multiplied by the number of units produced at the power 2. So let me just draw this graph to explain what's going on here. Imagine that this is the quantity of apples that we are producing, and this is the effort cost on this axis here. Now, if I produce the first unit, the effort cost is going to be equal to 0.5 multiplied by the number of apples produced, which is 1 at the power 2, which gives an effort cost that is calculated here of 0.5 happiness. So the first apple costs me 0.5 happiness right there. Very well. This is what we call the marginal cost of collecting the apple. Is the extra cost that you need to incur if you want to pick up the first apple. Now in this level, luckily, there are no other uses of your agent's time. Your agent can only do one thing, which is collecting apples. So the opportunity cost of picking up that apple is not really any other activity that you need to forego because you are collecting apples. Instead, the only cost here, the only opportunity cost in this level is the disutility from effort. So the only cost in this case is the 0.5 unit of happiness that your character has to forego. They don't like working, so their happiness decreased by 0.5. And how about the marginal benefit? What is the benefit of collecting the first apple? Well, the benefit is given by the happiness that you can obtain if you eat the apple, which is constant and equal to 0.75. So I'm going to make another graph here with the quantity of apples, and this is the utility that you derive from eating the apple, and the utility is equal to 0.75. The cost-benefit principle asks you to compare the happiness that you derive, so the benefit that you derive from consuming the first apple, which is equal to 0.75, compare this with the cost, which is the marginal cost, in this case, 0.5. Remember, when you identify the cost, you need to be really careful to understand the model in front of you. This is an example where there is no alternative activity. The only thing you can do is collecting apples. So the opportunity cost of collecting apples is just the disutility from effort, the happiness penalty because this character doesn't like work. But in other models, it may be that there are other costs. So watch out for a really careful calculation of the opportunity cost, because if you don't calculate the opportunity cost, it's also hard to get the cost-benefit principle right. Because at any point, you need to compare the marginal cost, or we should say the marginal opportunity cost, with the marginal benefit. In this case, marginal benefit 0.75 greater than 0.5, it sounds like it's a good idea to pick up that apple. I can stop thinking about it and just pick it up. I am clicking on it and I picked it up. You can see that the logs here are telling me that I crafted one apple in 2.3 seconds and it costed me 0.5 happiness. But I of course also gather an apple that can give me happiness later on, so this may be a good decision. And in fact, following the cost-benefit principle, if you want to maximize your happiness, this sounds like the right decision. Now, if I right-click on this apple again, you are going to see something interesting. Now, the number produced, at this point, the decision is, should I produce an extra apple? Well, if the number of apples produced in a market cycle is 2, now the effort equation is 0.5 multiplied by 2 at the power 2, which means the cost of effort for the second apple is, so the cost of effort if you produce 2 apples is now 1.5 happiness. Let me put it in the graph here, because I think this is really important. If you want to produce 2 apples, the cost of effort is going to be higher and is going to be equal to 1.5. I think you can see how this is going. The cost of producing apples is exponential because it's the cost is given by 0.5 multiplied by the quantity at the power 2. This is an exponential function of the quantity produced, which means it will correspond to an effort cost which is non-linear, but it's actually increasing exponential. It gets more and more costly to pick up the apple. Why would that be the case? Well, in many activities, the more you do them, the more costly they become. The first apple may be easy to pick up and collect, but the second apple, maybe it's a little bit further away. It takes a little bit of extra effort. Or perhaps after picking the first apple, you feel more tired, and so it's even more costly to reach for the second apple. Think about you studying. The first hour of study can be pleasant or just okay. The second hour may be more tiring, more hard to do, and requires more effort and more will on your part, and so on and so forth. If you have 10 hours of studying, the 10th hour could be even harder to engage with. So this is the idea of increasing opportunity cost. Increasing opportunity cost is says that in the process of increasing production of a good, you should first employ those resources with the lowest opportunity cost, and only once these are exhausted, turn to resources with higher cost. This is also called the low-hanging fruit principle, and clearly is represented at this level. The first apple, it's probably the closest one to you. You pick it, it has a relatively low opportunity cost, but the more you go on, the harder it is to grab those apples, and so you are experiencing what we call an increasing opportunity cost of taking the extra action, which in this case is collecting the apple. Now, you are faced with a situation, as I was saying, where your effort cost increase exponentially, whereas the utility is actually constant. The first apple gives you 0.75, the second apple gives you the same amount of happiness, so it's linear. It's a straight line like this. If you want to decide whether you should collect the second apple, you should again use the cost-benefit principle here and compare the marginal cost, which in this case is 1.5 happiness, with the marginal benefit, which is 0.75. If the marginal benefit is greater, you should go for the action, otherwise you shouldn't. And I'm gonna let you decide what is the best strategy in this case. Should I pick up the second apple or not? I'm going to leave the answer to you. Now I'm going to continue time and guide you towards the end of this scenario. You can talk with these wizards to understand a little bit better the concepts that we have expressed here, and then we can go home, place our apple on the table. On the table you can see everything that affects my happiness during the day, the apple that I placed, but also the effort cost that it costed me, that I had to pay to produce that apple. And then again, you can speed up time to finish the day, or you can press the end scenario button here when you are satisfied that you have done everything that you wanted to do in the level. Now, getting back to our website, let's have a look at this. If we go back to the website, and in particular to this page here, the online course, if you click on the Your Progress page up here, you're gonna see that I have already achieved 5 scenario points here, and this will eventually add to my course marks up here. So we are updating this over time, but you can see how whatever I earn in game is added here, and it will end up being added to my course mark here. And you can track how we calculate the course mark from scenario points to course mark by clicking on this question mark here. Very well. You can also check the game reward tab, and you can see for each scenario, for example, chapter 1, I have achieved full score. This was your first look at the Play Economics game, the website. Thank you very much and see you soon.